let's move over and talk some turn 0 placement for our Academy 101 segment. So welcome to our Academy 101 segment where we will be talking about turn 0. Hopefully everybody on this stream is in the turn 0 because JJ has a little bit of information that he wants to help everyone out. And we thought since we had Nick on and Nick's won so much stuff lately, it would be even more beneficial to actually have a conversation around turn 0 placement and all of that fun stuff, as long as my stupid cam link wants to work.
Yeah. So this is a discussion that's been going around for quite some time, and shout out to Viper Squadron and Crispy doing a video on their take on turn 0 replacement. But I think I wanted to do something like of a deep dive into this to kind of go over it to help out newer players that are going into the game that want to learn a little more about strategy, about setting up correctly for their lists, and to kind of give them a little bit of a guide for that. So the first thing I want to talk about is the list building part, right? A lot of people, they make their builds for whatever faction they want, and then they just choose 3 random obstacles to go from there. And I think that sometimes you sometimes either can cripple or enhance your list depending on the depending on the obstacles that you choose for your list. There are certain pilots that will prefer certain obstacles if they have any type of pilot abilities or crew abilities that allow them to ignore certain restrictions or certain negative effects of obstacles, and meanwhile your opponent cannot do that. So making sure those are incorporated as part of your list can be very, very important. For instance, like if you have a list that has a lot of repositioning aces, choosing large obstacles can help provide cover for those aces if they need to disengage, or it can help create choke points where your opponent can easily follow through, or where you can create kill boxes for your list to go in and take out certain ships on your opponent's side. You can choose debris clouds for ships that can mitigate stress. For instance, on the Resistance, you have, oh my goodness, her Corsella, thank you. Corsella, which if you're not familiar with Corsella, it's a crew for the Resistance that after you perform a blue maneuver, you can get rid of, after you fully execute a blue maneuver, you can fully discard all your stress. So in an emergency where you absolutely need to get out of a jam, going through the debris cloud absolutely helps you to get rid of all the stress, and you can still perform an action, assuming that you clear that obstacle completely. Gas clouds to help you break locks. Again, if you have, for instance, on Scum, if you have Kira crew that allows you to ignore different obstacles while you have that obstacle locked, putting your ship on a gas cloud that has a lock while you have Kira crew allows you to basically be unlockable. You cannot be locked or while your ship is on that, because your opponent can ignore that obstacle or without having something like Kira crew, but you absolutely can. So it provides a little bit of defense. You can further
just don't
exploit
get jammed
that.
or ionized when you have
exactly. Don't get jammed and ionized, but you can further take advantage of that with like trick shot, for instance. Especially if you have a little bit of space between your base and the obstacle in front of you and your opponent, just being able to get that extra die out definitely helps out with your offensive potential as well. And then adjusting the size of the obstacles as well for like medium, large bases. Size objectives or obstacles rather, having smaller ones gives you a little bit more space for those ships to move around and be able to be effective by covering a lot more area with their arcs if they're able to move more openly in that. Well, what are you guys' thoughts on list building and selecting the right objectives or obstacles?
And you're gonna hate me, but like I agree with everything you said. I agree with. There's definitely a strategy. I don't tend to play lists where it matters as much. So I usually take I like to bring like big rocks and debris to like plug up lanes or like cover areas or just make it more difficult for my opponent to fly around. But yeah, I tend to. It just depends on what kind of list builder you are. I don't play a lot of medium large bases that want to fly over gas clouds. I know some people bring gas clouds because they're like, only a crit will ionize me with a medium or large base, so they bring those. Like with the Arc 170 lists, they're really popular. I get it. And there's also you can break locks on them. Like there's a lot of cool effects that gas clouds do that are like kind of helpful. But I usually just have been using the same 3 obstacles like every time I play.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to bring the 2 debris clouds from the newer pack, and then one of the large asteroids. Like that's my standard loadout for most of the obstacles, unless I'm bringing something in particular. Like the gas cloud thing, I definitely used a lot when I was running double fire sprays, just to help Iman not get locked. But yeah, I mean or if you're playing CIS, you never bring a gas cloud, right? Because you always want to be able to latch onto one of those.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, talking about with Han, I think some people get caught in the idea that they should bring tiny, small obstacles because of Han. But here's the reality, guys. Han, it doesn't really matter that as much. Han will still get the reroll. It's about where you place your obstacles when it comes to pilots like Han. Having bigger ones actually can be more beneficial to you because of where you can put them to make them go different ways. So I think this part of turn zero, some people overthink it a little bit. It is very important, but like ultimately your games are decided by variance and your decisions, not gosh, if I had brought that larger debris. That's just not how games usually go. Or man, I could have used that gas cloud there.
Yeah,
or other things that contribute to a win or loss.
Yeah, for me, oddly enough, the smaller obstacles have always been historically worse for me because for some reason I always guarantee that I land on one at least every single time.
Piece I always hit every single time.
And some mats, dude, they blend in depending on what mat you use, dude.
Yeah,
that's why I take the Mandalorian
fly.
asteroids. They just blend in with little blue mats.
Yeah. Have you guys seen the crate map that they have that's so busy that they were using during Crate Cup? That is like the worst map because you can't see any obstacles on board.
Oh, there's one that I won in Ohio that is just a blue mat with a whole bunch of asteroids going in the middle, and they're the exact colors of the Mandalorian.
I know exactly which one you're talking about. Yep, yeah, I've seen that one.
And you just put it right by there. You just like never notice it. It's great.
So the next part, speaking about just different scenarios depending on what ships you're bringing in. Let's talk about placing obstacles for particular scenarios, right? So let's take a look first at assault at the satellite array. We know historically large and medium bases do have an advantage for assault at the satellite array as they count as 2 ships rather than the small bases which just count as 1. So you typically see those ships excel more at those scenarios just because of that advantage that they have on there. Do you guys tend to change your objective placement depending on like where the control points are to like help block off certain areas?
I fly a lot of large bases, so I try to put like an asteroid. Well, for like assault, I try to set it up that there's multiple points in which I could take 2 of them with 1 ship, and then I try to place a rock slightly askew that I can reach, but they won't be able to put directly in the middle where I need to go. Conversely, if you're going against medium and large base ships, you should put a rock directly between 2 objectives.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, even there are times where you can place like 3 objectives within range of each other, and you can set 1 ship and claim up to 3. And anytime I see that, as much as I want to leave it open, that's like an instant spot where I'm going to put an obstacle every time.
Yeah, especially if you have to face off against Alex Liss, where he just parks his ship there and then says, "Yeah, go ahead and block me. I'm going to get 3 points every turn." Ha ha ha. And
I just stop her as much as I want. It's fine.
And I think that's like when I set up with CIS, if I have a ship that lands on an obstacle or 2 of them, I specifically go out of my way to try and place them where it's not the triangle piece, because getting a triangle with a droid is insanely hard. Like you have to be so precise. But typically, you could get two objectives in one area, and I did have one game back in NCX days where I did have that. I think that was 2 seasons ago. But I had one where I placed this like 2 objectives and put 2 droids on, and then was able to counter like people just like, you come kill the droids because they're collecting 3 objectives a turn. Merry Christmas, you know. But that's a rarity. Like as long as you know playing wise what to do with it. If you don't like, if somebody's gonna put a rock in the middle of the 3 of them and they're gonna sit on it, just murder them, right? And if they're gonna leave that open space, then you know where somebody's gonna be. So I think like a lot of the obstacle placement piece of that, like I don't care for gas clouds except for if I'm flying ships that don't care about locks. So if I fly Republic and I'm not getting a million locks, I'll take the gas clouds because it could possibly help me. And like if a Jag gets ionized, what do I care if he one forwards and takes a focus? I don't care as much about that.
Well, I care because he's strained, and you can't use Born for this while you're strained.
All right. Well, whatever. But...
Yeah.
So,
super quick. It's okay. I just saw what Mike said in the chat. I just want to set the record straight that there's nothing wrong with TTS. I've played on TTS for a long time. We all play on Tabletop Simulator quite often. I just have a ridiculously long string of confirmation bias that makes me just not enjoy playing on Tabletop Simulator as much anymore. And I've had way more fun and success playing in real life, like the physical game. So I've just personally don't love TTS just because I've had a lot of bad luck playing it. But it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. That makes sense. All right.
Yes.
Just didn't want people to think there's anything actually physically wrong with Tabletop Simulator.
I heard Tabletop Simulator hates everyone from the Midwest.
If you watch my Draft League games, you'll know why I don't like playing on Tabletop Simulator.
We have an entire section where it's just about whining about dice and Tabletop Simulator, and I think Crispy is like the number one poster.
Number one person, yeah. Right.
So the other piece I wanted to talk about for obstacles and objective placements for assault on the satellite array. I know we talked a little bit about placing objectives closer together where you can contest two objectives together. Have you guys find yourselves doing that more often, or do you feel like you find yourself spreading out a lot more if you have a larger amount of ships?
I think it depends. I think for me it depends on which one it is, right? So if we talk about Scramble,
yeah,
I have depending on their ship the amount of ships they have in their list, I have started actually placing the objective farther away from the middle in an effort to force them to keep one ship back farther to claim it. I don't know if that's the correct answer or not, but I do know that like I have started doing that a little bit. If they have a 6-ship list, I don't do that because them losing a ship is not the end of the world. Yeah. But on a 4-ship list, it does make a difference. Like they can leave in Rebels, they could leave Sabine back there. But if I have 5 ships, I'm just taking one ship and sending it towards Sabine and that objective. Because if you're going to be there, I'm just going to go try to murder you. Not that.
Well, the other benefit of placing it further away from the center point is that later in the game, they cannot turn around and reach it again. Some people like to keep everything like it's Scramble. Let's just use Scramble as an example. To keep everything exactly at range 2 of each other, like, your side, my side, like towards the middle. And that way people can just kind of toilet bowl and end up coming back to that same objective point and scrambling it again. When you distance everything, people have to be more tactical with where they're moving their ships. If they end up disengaging, then the point that they claim that was on their side in like the second round, you can claim, and they have to do the same for your side and go all the way to the other side to get it.
It kind of depends on how fast your ships are too. Because if you have not terribly fast ships, you don't generally want to put it all the way in BFE because you won't be able to reach there meaningfully and still engage.
Yep. That's actually a great point. That's a great point. It also influences engagements. Salvage, I think, is a really good example because it's so hindering with what you cannot do once you take a crate and what you're worried about losing it when you take a crit. Like, depending on where they are, you can put a lot of pressure on your opponent. And that's the way I look at objectives is like, how can I pressure my opponent into playing in a
Making a
way that
decision.
works for me, making a decision that I can take advantage of. And with high initiative ships that were in my list, like with Scramble, I'm like, great, you took it, but my Vader's going to take it right back. Guaranteed every turn, I am in a position to take it right back.
Now, have you guys ever considered, at least for Scramble, placing an objective all the way as far back into your opponent's side?
I've done that before, but also
Mhm.
it really depends on how fast my ships are. If I have like an
Yeah.
A-wing or like a silencer or something, that's no problem for me. But if I'm playing like my scum list, that's slow. That ain't going to the other half of the board. I have to put it closer to everything else.
Yeah, typically I do it at like I do it like range like 2.5 from the center, so it's like a little further back, but not so far back that I have to commit and go super fast. But it's also far enough back on their side that it is harder for them to get to reclaim or get back to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like placing objectives, the hard part is figuring out what your opponent's list does really well and trying to mess with that by placing your objectives. Because, like, if they don't have fast ships, you can bury one of your like scramble objectives super close to your edge, or like closer to your edge of the board, or like an assault or something back there where they probably aren't going to reach it in time.
Yeah, I think it's wrong to have a turn zero approach where you are assuming that your opponent is going to struggle with getting their side of the objectives. Just assume that they're going to be able to get 1 or 2 points, whether it be the salvage, whether it be scrambling their side. Like, it's all about having more than them. That gets determined later in the game. Who has more crates, who has more scramble points, who is near more assault points, or who's in the center point, right? So it's bad to just like, you can't control what your opponent does. So stop acting like you can set up in a way that prohibits them from being able to do something that they can do. Like, that's not what's going to decide your game, is them taking the point that is rightfully on their side of the board. That is very easy to claim. Like, at least early in the game.
Yeah, and I think that's you bring up a good point, right? Like you have to understand the other side and what they're going to spend their time doing. Like if you look at a list like Nick's and you go, well, is he going to leave one ship here or one ship there and it not matter? Nick just explained with that Empire list that he can choose 2 objective getters if he wants to, and it's typically the same ones. Like I don't know how often you're using Vader as the objective getter unless everybody just leaves Vader alone, but he is there as an option. But mainly,
I could choose when I want to. It can be a last minute decision. It's a beautiful luxury to have with a list like that.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, you know what? I think I actually will take this crate with Vader. Sure.
Yeah.
I don't care.
And in my loss to D, that was the same thing. Like D picked up a crate with Vader, and in the long run, between killing Tease 81 and Vader having that crate, because I couldn't knock the crate off of Vader no matter what I wanted to do. Like when you roll 3 green dice and have 3 force and a focus,
right?
It's very hard to take a crate off of Vader sometimes. And when you already spent your afterburner charges, what do you care?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, you must have spent those afterburners. Yeah.
Yes. So I don't know. I think if
you
look
with
at
the boys too, like I'm like, oh, I'd rather be able to boost, but you know what? No, I'm gonna make my opponent freak out that I have 4 crates right now. That's what I did with D-Yoon. I beat him 21-20 because of that. So just like it all matters.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I think that's like part of the beauty of the objectives, right? Like I mean, we've talked about this a little bit last episode, is where I really think the objectives change play style and make the game have another dimension it didn't have before.
Yeah,
it's amazing and exhausting, man. It's amazing and exhausting. Like, it's cool, but it's so exhausting.
It is.
Yeah,
I do agree with you.
Now, we stumbled on a little bit of talking about salvage. Do you guys find yourself placing these salvage tokens closer together, or do you spread them out depending on like what you feel?
So when I do salvage, I pay a lot more attention to where the asteroids are, because I want to try to funnel the people to a particular area in salvage that makes it very difficult for them to get over there or to escape with the asteroids. It's kind of like a dual prong thing. It's like I see where the choke points are, and then I put the salvage crates over there, because I have to force them to even consider picking it up if my ships are going real fast at them. And I just have like Bosk or whatever in the back grabbing a crate. But I'm not sure, if that's the correct way. It's just, for me, it's a lot more of, well, I want to make it very difficult for them to get over to this side of the board. And if they do, I could probably outjoust them. kind of thing.
I would just say keeping things spread apart where that, like the Arc 170, like there's so many archetypes right now that are popular that fly one way and only one way. So when you set them all far apart, let's just use the Arc 170s again as an example because they're just so good right now. Now they do have to think about, okay, well, do I either just not worry about the salvage on the other side of the board and keep my formation the same, or do I split a couple up and widen them a little bit? And that ends up, again, you're putting pressure on your opponent to break their formation, to make decisions that end up hurting the quality of their engagements, because maybe now their Arc 170s are too far away for Selfless, or Padme is at range 4 and can't use her ability because she stayed back and grabbed a crate or whatever. I would say keeping them spread out across the board like this instead of all on one side. This is because we don't have TTS. I'm just doing this, miming everything. Is like it's important. And even if they do have an objective monkey like Sabine, right? You can't control that. Sabine was always going to be that piece anyways. But just make it so that Sabine is never shooting because she has to be all the way on the other side of the board. Like, she's only 2 points, but she is one of 5 ships. Like, take pieces of the equation out where you can, or influence it at least. Be an influencer, man.
Yeah. And if you think about it, it's kind of the same way. Like, when we do salvage, if I have CIS, I usually put one crate towards the back in the center. And I do that on purpose because I'm going to probably pick that up with either the HMP or I'm going to pick it up with the 2-point droid and force you to come get it. But you're right. It takes the offensive piece out of it. But putting it in the back center where I can get it and still, unless you barrel roll, or like not barrel roll, that's a stupid, unless you come barreling in on me, you're not going to take that ship out even round 2. And I only need it for 2 rounds to collect 2 points to be worth its value. And if you're going to invest that time, again, going into that. But that's the idea, is like, if you put it in the back center and your objective monkey is going to pick that up, they're going to have to place the other one closer to the center of the board, which forces then either you pick it up for the engagement, and I think it then depends on initiative, right? Like, if I'm an I6 and I'm a Sunfac, and I can get a focus and tractor off on you, I'm probably not going to pick up that crate, that churn. But if we're not getting shots in, and I'm a Sunfac, I'm going to pick that crate up, and then I'm going to run past you and try to shoot you from the side, one of the side shots, and throw a tractor and a focus token at you. Because Sunfac doesn't care about traditional. It's stupid. The Nantex is a cool design, but it's kind of dumb. Right, like it's just kind of it's just a silly design for scenarios. Obviously, it's just very silly.
Well, I also think that it depends, Tanner, on if you are going to be able to actually kill that ship or not. Like, sure, you have an opportunity to do a ton of damage, but if there's no way that you feel like you can actually kill it anytime soon, I think if the math supports it, like let's say you have 14 or 15 points, and the difference between 2 crates versus 3 is enough to mathematically close the door on your opponent. Even though you have this great haymaker shot, take the crate. Like, yep. Because then they can't win. They just cannot win.
Yep. I had picked up a crate with Sunny. I'm gonna call him Sunny just to piss Zach off. And Sunfac. Yeah, I don't care. I don't give a shit. He's the original Sunny. Fuck the scum Sunny.
It was out long before the Sunfac one was out.
Yeah, true. Care. I was like, whoa.
I know, I do it just to piss Zach off. But anyway, now that we've got our rating for the night, but I've done that with Sunny before, is where I've picked up a crate and tractored myself, to be out of a shot on a last turn, and that crate made the difference for the game. It's a rare thing, but it does happen.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So going back to to what Alex had mentioned earlier about creating choke points like in salvage and stuff. How often do you guys find when you place your obstacles that you're placing your obstacles to create choke points versus spreading them out? Like, what's your philosophy on when you do either?
With my scum list, I need choke points or I pretty much lose because I have large bases not moving, and I need a space parking lot around me, and I need asteroids around me to protect me from people approaching at different vectors. Also, that's your best way of killing ships is to surround them in kill boxes because they had to go
Right.
through an obstacle awkwardly. Well, that's on them if they decide to do that.
Yeah, obstacles are about creating lanes in my head. Like that's the way my brain works. So like what kind of like with media like the with Han and Arc 170s and stuff, which I feel like I'm really like that's the only two lists that I'm thinking about playing against because that's all that you see these days. It's just like if the only lane that they have like to keep the perfect formation is going down the side of the board, then I think you've set up in a good way. And your opponent probably won't want to do that because you're not going to be jousting them. You shouldn't be, at least. So then they have to start trying to get creative with how they split each other up or keeping a formation. Maybe one of them opts to barrel roll to get out of the way, and then that means that they no longer have a mod for defense or for attacking. Like, yeah, they're definitely. I look at them as choke points, and also just like on my side when I set them up on my side as cover. Like I'm going to place one in front of this scenario or this objective so that when like Merrick goes to scramble, even though he doesn't have any tokens, he's taking a range 3 obstructed shot. Like he has a better chance of not taking any damage. Like so choke points and cover are the two that I look at the most.
I mean, too bad we didn't get free evades anymore, right? I mean, that was the thing.
That was the only thing keeping Cody's ships alive.
Uh, the good old days, right? Free evades.
Yeah,
Gas
change
cloud,
the
free
blank
evades.
to an evade. Blank to
Yep.
an evade.
Yeah.
That way, only Cody took only 1 damage instead of 2.
All right. So the last part of this, obviously, would be, we placed all of our objective points, we placed all of our obstacles on the board. Now let's talk about placing ships on the board. And I think that this is probably one of the most important skills that a new player can learn when they're starting out. Is how do I place my ships, right? So obviously there's a multitude of different lists out there that we see currently in the meta, and of course they'll vary differently in sizes, initiatives, and such. But we want to kind of like talk about this as general as possible here. So let's talk about spacing and formation flying. Let's say you have a list that has a lot of initiatives that line up, and you want them to fly in a formation. What do you guys normally do when you want to try to fly in formation? Like, how do you guys tackle on the spacing? Do you guys have a particular trick that you guys use in terms of like allowing certain amount of space in between ships? How do you guys do it?
I don't fly things in formations. I almost exclusively do just a firing line where I have 5 ships evenly spaced out between the other parts of the board.
Now I know you say that, but is it mainly because you have larger ships, or do you do that you're flying just small bases?
No, I do it when I'm just flying small bases. But I do have the more maneuverable ships on the flank. So depending on where my opponent sets up, I can either go fast with one side or collapse both in at a certain point while my slower ships are going up the center of the board or off the angle of wherever probably the correct approach vector is. But I have flown ships in formations a little bit, like a loose formation, and generally I give them slightly larger than the width of the template, like a 1 or 2 straight template. I go slightly larger because I have shaky hands occasionally. So I don't want them to crash into each other.
Yeah. How about you, Nick?
Sorry. Oh, suck it, Tanner. So do you want to go, Tanner?
No, go ahead.
I like to be as non-committal as possible I spread things out, and then I like to place, we talked about this on your show, I think the last time I was on. I like to place my ships right in front of obstacles and then be able to readjust with a barrel roll. Not everybody's playing ships that can do that, but I play a lot of small base ships. So I typically like to spread things out and then be able to readjust if I see that somebody decided to go all in one direction, or I learn more information that I didn't have upon setup. So also because being non-committal early on is an important way to keep your cards close to your chest. If you reveal exactly what you're trying to do early on, your opponent has a lot of time to be able to counter it. So yeah, that's usually the way that I set it up. With scenarios, you have to be mindful of the fact that it's kind of unacceptable to just ditch your own scenario unless both your opponent and you agree to honorable joust. But like if you have a crate on your side or your scramble point, or you need to make sure that you claim those points, because you will not have a good chance to claim it again in most games later on. Like, take the crate, because it's going to be you'll never go back to get it again. Your opponent will be able to grab it, not you. So you got to try to do that. Scramble the point to force your opponent to go over there to take it back. Also, because you have to scramble the point that's on your side, you need to score those points. And just don't leave anything out to dry. That's usually why a lot of people lose, newer players. They're like, I'll have my Luke be, like 30 parsecs away from the rest of my squad. And then he gets, shot at 3 times and dies. And it's like, man, this game went badly for me. And it's like, well, yeah, there was nothing protecting one of your more valuable ships. So it's about protecting your list as well as playing, to be non-committal and to play the scenario as well.
Yeah. Chris, what about you, man? Do you play a lot of separatists with droids? How do you handle the placing issue, like when you're trying to space your ships out?
Well, I think it depends. A lot of it depends typically on the scenario, right, and what my opponent is flying. I have a method that I would say is an approved method, and then I have a method that Tanner likes to just fly. I also like the flanking pieces that go on opposite sides of the board and force you to choose who you're going to shoot at or go after. So, like, I have a Grievous and I have a T-81. Both of them are I-4s. Typically, they're not super great into an I-5 and I-6 meta, except for it's Grievous, right? And it's T-81. And if you place your forces to come after T-81, I'm going to tank him and toil around the edge of the board, just like Nick said, and just sit there. Because T-81 can kind of sit in the back. He's not going to take a crate ever. Almost ever, I guess. Almost ever. Because he doesn't want to not be able to boost or barrel roll. Whereas Grievous, on the other hand, doesn't care as much about that piece of it. Like, Grievous would love to boost or barrel roll, but he doesn't have to do that. It's not like a requirement to keep that ship alive, because he's got 7 to 8 health, no matter what. And he gets rid of crits mysteriously. So, like, we don't know how he does it, but somehow Grievous just, like, kind of tossed them out. But in terms of formation flying, if I do want to set up, like, a few ships in a block, I've gone away from, like, a 7 or 8 ship block that I used to fly, because we don't do that anymore. And I've gone to, let's just say, a 2 to 3 ship. I typically will take that one, the one straight maneuver, and I will place it between my ships as a base length. And if I'm going to do some sort of an angle, so if I put them in the corner because I'm going to angle them in, I will actually take it and put that one in between, and then give them space on each side of it, so that way I can angle in as a group. Because I have more than one time bumped droid ships. More than one time, definitely. So that's typically how that would go, in terms of how, like, if you want that physical piece for the setup. But in terms of actually flying that, the philosophy I would agree with Nick is you toil around that side of the board. If you've ever played me before, it's a 50-50 toss-up. I'm either going to 5 straight boost and try to shoot you and then worry about my turnaround round 2 or 3. Or I'm going to 5 straight boost and then place myself so that I can, like, 1 or 2 bank and get the objective next turn and block you. I'm going to do one of those 2 things. That's, like, the Tanner. Like, I fly really fast sometimes, and I know I shouldn't, because I've lost games where people are like, yeah, we just knew you were going to 5 straight boosts. And like, fuck,
Well, yeah. Sometimes I'll place the boys next to each other, and then I'll dial in like a 2 straight, and people are like, what? I'm like, yeah. And I'll do it again. I'll do straight again. It's fine.
How dare you go slow?
Well, because
Yeah.
they'll go so fast to try to block me, and if I do a 2 straight and I do a 2 straight again, there's no way they could block me.
Yeah, they're not yet. Well, you haven't had a Sunfec and a T81 thrown at you.
Or
But
okay, in those cases, Tanner, I'll barrel roll all the way back so the angle's off, and then I can
There you
bank
go.
in, and there's still no way you can block me.
there you go. There you go. The better move is, Nick, is the fact that if I do block you, it's inconsequential because you're just going to keep moving your boys around the board, or you're going to 4K and boost in with Afterburner to shoot me. So it's not going to matter.
Yeah, right. Yep.
But in all seriousness, in that aspect of it is, if your goal is to block them and start claiming those objectives, like if they're a fast maneuverable ship, blocking them does not much good. But I won't lie and tell you that I've taken T81 and literally like set them up in formation and moved the rest of the formation towards the center of the board and left T81 by himself to just fly and try to block you and like toil around. I have tied up somebody's dirge more than one time with T81, and then he just doesn't die. And then people get angry because they can't kill T81. And it's like, well, I can't kill dirge, you can't kill T81. Like, are you not going to collect objectives? Oh, nope, I'm going to. Okay, there you go. You know, so I think that's for formation flying in CIS. That's kind of the approach for it.
Nice.
If we got away from objectives, we would just go back to flying in a block again. I would have 2 blocks because that's what I used to do. I used to put 2 blocks on the side and put Watt in the center.
Well,
I
also
love me some Watt.
keep in mind that road matters so much for placing your ships and how you move them too. I mean, especially placing, like you place where you think, if you have no information, if you're playing the meta right now where there's mostly I4s and up and you have to place first, you're kind of just taking, you got to be conservative and place them in places where you can cover your back or cover your flank. But if you have all that information, then you can be like, cool, I'm going to put everything right here to threaten this piece. I'm going to put these here, get a 5 straight boost or whatever. It plays such a huge factor. Like, so sometimes people take too big of a risk if they're the first player when setting up their ships, because they forget that their opponent gets to decide where they put theirs.
So that's definitely a point I wanted to talk about. Like, how much do you think that, like, let's say you had a list that was mainly like initiative 4s or lower, how much that does your philosophy of where you place your ships or space them, how much does that affect you guys? Like when you're trying to like predict where you think your opponent is going to go? Do you try to spread them out as much as you can, or do you congregate them towards the center so that we can react better? What do you think is a better approach for a newer player?
Oh, so I might be literally the person who won the Star Champ with the least amount of initiative, because I think you averaged out my list as a 3.8 initiative across the board. So I almost always set up before my opponent. So again, large base middle, another large base next to it so you can't get behind it, firing line, and then figure it out from there. If you have low initiative, that's kind of what you have to do. If you set up all your ships on one side of the board, if you don't have a better jousting list than your opponent, they just set up on the other side of the board. And it's kind of a wash.
Yeah.
So, but if you have a lot of low initiative, you kind of have to keep more towards the center, see where they are.
Well, and 75% of the time, you're playing a scenario where it'd be very asinine to place everything on one corner of the board.
Right.
Because your opponent's just going to play the objective.
Exactly.
And you decided not to, and you lost immediately.
So you do kind of have to spread out if you have lower initiative. Like you can't just set up in one corner.
Yeah, definitely.
But if I have like same initiative stuff, like if I'm playing like a Republic list and I have like Obi-Wan and stuff, I have the luxury of seeing where at least some of their ships are going. So that way you can like, well, my low initiative ships is over here on this side of the board, and all my high initiative stuff's going over here because that will be flanking them. So I'm going to turn that lower initiative closer to where my high initiative stuff is and work it out from there. I'm not a very I go in with one strategy kind of thing. I just YOLO everything and see how it works out.
All right.
It's a good strategy, Alex. Just YOLO everything. Very comprehensive. We got 4 brains putting our brains together here. Talk strategy. I just YOLO it. I'll just
I
figure it
mean-
out.
Alex, no. Hold on. That's a misrepresentation. Alex says, give me a beer and then let me YOLO it.
Yeah.
And by round 3, it's if I haven't had 4 beers, I'm definitely not winning.
The amount of alcohol consumption is equal to the amount of wins. So yes.
I will tell you. You all laugh at this, like, and it's funny. It's funny. I've watched this happen at a when we went to, what was the name
Worlds?
of that? No. I watched you all tank at Worlds, but no. What was the fucking thing we went to in December? I don't remember. It was a team tournament in Ohio. We all
Oh,
went to.
Rust Cup. Yes.
Rust Cup. There you go. I literally have watched them consume alcohol and play better.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
not
usually
me.
have that.
Oh,
Not
Cody
me.
has to be hungover or drunk in order to do well.
You see, dude, my top 4 game, I had to ask for another 10 minutes because we were marking so much and taking so long to mark things. Like, it was like over 10 minutes of my game was dedicated to the judges marking things to move like Sabine like an 1/8 of an inch forward. Like,
For Worlds, my breakfast was some dry oatmeal.
doing
and 2
that while you're
beers.
drunk? Come on. Come on.
Cody chugged, well, he tried to shotgun a hop slam before Worlds, and he did it. Or it was Adepticon, but it wasn't Worlds at the time. So we just go in, we just drink a lot, and we just figure it out as we
Jesus.
go.
Oh my god, dude.
That's how
There's
we
too
do it.
many tokens, too many ships, too much marking. Like, I told Zach Barty beat me top 4. I'm like, dude, Zach, honestly, I'm okay. You beat me here, my guy, because you will have to continue to do this, and I will get to take a break. You will have to keep marking everything.
All right. Well, let's wrap turn 0 up. What is anybody's last thoughts before we conclude turn 0 and move into a few store champs that I have?
Just final thoughts. I think that if you're a newer player who's looking to get into the more competitive side of X-Wing with tournaments and store champ season in full swing, definitely practicing your turn 0 placements is a very, very big tool for you to help you properly set up your game plan for the rest of the match. I know that early on when you're learning the game, you're not thinking so much about that portion of the game. You're more concerned about learning what your pilots are doing. But once you start getting quite a few reps in, usually by the time you start getting to about I would say your 10th rep, that's when you really want to start streamlining your openings, your turn 0 placement to help maximize the effect for your list. And that should give you a very good chance to succeed in your matches. And who knows, you might be a new player and you take your local store championship, and we'll see you at Worlds. It'd be great.